Premier, can I, whilst we'll wait for our first question, the opening remarks that you gave us around how do you overturn bureaucracy and regulation, how do you get government out of the way, and I think you indicated around productivity commission. But the one point that I wanted to raise was around culture and the culture of the public service. I noticed when you were appointed Premier, Monday morning you were in and you were with the Governor, as opposed to, in most cases, it's been 4 or 5 days, and you wanted to make change straight away. How quick can you turn culture around to enable business in South Australia?
Can I just say I've been really impressed with every single person that I've met in the public service to date. Some people in the business community might have expected that we would get in there and sort of find a mess in terms of the public service. Can I tell you, I've met some very, very capable people, but what they've lacked, I think, is a framework for delivering good government, and I don't think they've had the leadership with the previous government that they deserve. We're going to work extraordinarily well with the public service. We've already effected quite significant organisational changes. You might have noted in my speech we've gone from 58 portfolios down to 14, single lines of reporting. So we have a minister, a chief executive and a department. We don't have sort of split portfolios. We don't have, the health minister also looking after arts and veterans affairs. We're really trying to keep things as tight as we possibly can so that there's real focus, there's real accountability, and there's real delivery for the people of South Australia. And look, I'm unashamedly pro-business. I come from the business community, and we're going to have a business-like approach to the organisation and building the culture in the public service, and that's going to be done in a very respectful way.
Are you concerned about the debate about tax? I mean, you made a number of comments around tax and the debate that's going on federally around tax. And given South Australia, small to medium enterprise, are you concerned at all if there's a shift federally of what impact that could have on our economy?
Well, I don't know whether the audience today has realised, but because it probably happened while you were involved in one of your sessions today, but Bill Shorten's done a backflip, so the threat, which would have been a disaster for a state like South Australia, has been removed. Okay. And look, again, we are very pro low taxes in South Australia. We want to put more money back into consumers' pockets, into small businesses' pockets, and they can make their own decisions on how to spend their money. I think the government is pretty much the least efficient redistributor of wealth, and so higher taxes and government picking winners is not our mantra. We want to have lower taxes, less regulation, more productive infrastructure, and let people set their own ambition and then achieve their own goals and aspirations.
Great. Questions from the floor? Please, ladies and gentlemen, let's get interactive here. Any questions from the Premier? No? Surely there's got to be a question for the Premier.
Back to you, David. What have you got? What have you got on that clipboard?
I've got a few. What about the Economic Development Board? Can I ask you about the Economic Development Board? Its function, its role, obviously it's been created now for some time by the previous administration, or going back a couple of administrations. What's your thoughts on its role going forward?
Well, actually we've removed it, so which sounds a bit callous because every one of the people that were on the Economic Development Board were very capable people. But the Economic Development Board had been in for a long period of time, and we think that after 16 years, a new government coming in, it's time to hit the reset button. So we've gone for a different board. It's not a representative board, it's an Economic Advisory Council, which I'll be announcing in the next few days. It's just 6 people, and they'll be providing advice directly to me. So it's not going to be with a huge secretariat. Importantly, I've made a commitment to keep one of those people appoint one of the people onto the new Economic Advisory Committee from the Economic Development Board, so we don't lose any of the excellent work that they've done. And I've got to say, when I've reviewed the work that they've done in the past and the advice that they'd provided to the government, quite frankly, it was mouthwatering. There's a lot of good advice. Unfortunately, not always was it observed. And look, governments can't implement every single suggestion that is given to it, but there were lots of very good pieces of advice that I just don't think the previous government took up. So different format, 6 people, and bit of bad luck for those people that have accepted those positions, unfortunately not paid. And I'll tell you one thing, every person that we approached said, love to do it. And then we said, and of course there's no money for this position, and they said, we don't mind at all. We are here to help. We want to see South Australia do well. And that's one of the things that I've been overwhelmed with since I became the Premier of South Australia. And I don't know whether this is a sort of an Australian sort of tray, but sometimes we like to knock off the people that are at the top of the tree. But I think as Australians, we like to help people up that are not doing well. And I think there's a lot of goodwill towards South Australia at the moment. A lot of people from right around the country who think that we are a great state, but not fulfilling our full ambition at the moment. And I've been overwhelmed. You know, I had Sir Rod Eddington and Mark Birrell assisting us in framing the terms of reference, the legislation, and helping with some of the selections for the establishment of Infrastructure SA. And I said to Sir Rod, now, I hope this isn't going to be a big bill. And he said, look, absolutely not. I've got a lot of affection for South Australia. I'd love to see it do well again. There'll be no bill from me whatsoever, but you are going to have to take me out for dinner. It was the most expensive dinner I've ever paid for. But it was a very enjoyable dinner. And that's an example of where people are saying, look, we want to help out.
We have a question, I'm told, down the front here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Andrew Coombe from Barton Deakin Government Relations. Premier, you've talked about trying to attract the space agency here. Can you just expand on what you think that would bring to the state?
Thanks, Andrew.
Look, this is a great opportunity for South Australia. It was included in the federal budget, the money for it. And in fact, it was announced here in South Australia last year at the IAC 2017 conference when we had every single space agency from the world here in South Australia. This is a massively growing sector of our global economy, and we are really well placed in South Australia to put in a very competitive bid for the National Space Agency. We want it based here. Now, the Prime Minister has appointed as the interim CEO, Megan Clark, Dr. Megan Clark, who was the former head of the CSIRO in South Australia. She's over in Adelaide. Can you believe it, David? On Friday the 13th. Not good. Anyway, that was the day that she gave us to begin the conversation. So we believe we've got a really strong bid. We've got a great history in the space sector. We've got great geography. Most importantly, though, I think we've got great ambition. We're seeing some really incredibly talented small and mid-sized companies. We've got Jim Wally in Nova Aerospace based in South Australia, as well as a large number now of start-up and scale-up organisations like Innovor and Fleet and Myriota, who are really, where people around the world are saying this is really incredible.
The cost of doing business here is terrific.
The cost of doing business, the ease of getting around, and the fact that we all can get to each other quickly, I think creates the right ecosystem for the federal government to select South Australia to host the National Space Agency. But it won't be winner takes all. Our bid is really going to be about working collaboratively with the rest of the nation. We've got an MOU that we've signed with the Northern Territory, one that we've signed with the ACT. We do work respectfully and collaboratively with other jurisdictions, and I think that's the approach that they're going to take. But hopefully a decision before the end of the year to bring the National Space Agency to Adelaide.
Great, thanks, Andrew. We've got another question down the back. In the middle, is it? Thank you.
Yep, me. Oh.
Microphone's coming. Yep.
Hello, I'm Heather Kroll. I'm the director at the Adelaide Fringe, and we are aware that the creative industries is forming one of the fastest growing parts in the economy in Australia, and I just wanted to ask whether there would be creative industries representation in your Economic Commission board there, just to make sure that it gets the acknowledgement it deserves, because it really is an industry that's full of opportunity, I think.
Thanks, Heather.
Heather, you're 100% right. It is a really important opportunity for South Australia, and I think if you look at the US, the fastest growing city in the US for the last sort of 4 or 5 years has been Austin, and Austin's got a lot of similarities in terms of its creative industries, its cultural offering, and I think one of the things that I really like about Austin, which is actually a sister city to Adelaide, is it's not trying to be Dallas and it's not trying to be Houston. It's not trying to do a Me Too, a smaller version of those other big cities in Texas. but it is actually there to set its own unique selling proposition, its own point of differentiation. We can do exactly the same here in South Australia, learn the lessons. We've got great creative sector, cultural sector in South Australia. What we need to do is to marry that up more effectively, I think, with the start-up, the entrepreneurial sector. We'd like to see the creative industries play a role in the redevelopment of the ORA site. And although I can't go into the specific people that are on the board, I do emphasise that it's not a representative board, but there is certainly one person on that board who has done quite a body of work around our creative industries in South Australia. Happy to talk about that at some later point.
Great, thanks, Premier. We've got one final question in the middle.
Afternoon, Premier. It's Anthony Penny from Business SA. The Western Australians who conveniently forget that they ran 14 years of budget surpluses and making an immense amount of noise in Canberra regarding HFE. Productivity Commission report's going to drop in the next couple of weeks. Based upon the interim report, it's likely that they're going to make recommendations to change the way GSD distribution currently exists. What's going to be your plan of attack to bat back against the federal government, even if there is a skerrick of interest in changing that formula?
Okay, well, my public comments today have been very clear. We don't support any changes to HFE that would disadvantage the people of South Australia. But, you know, we've got to be practical. The reality is the Productivity Commission report basically recommended taking money away from South Australia and giving it to Western Australia. And can I just say I'm in the middle of a negotiation with the feds at the moment. It is a complex negotiation. We're not conducting it via the media. We're doing it in a sensible, grown-up way. We're making it very clear to the Prime Minister and the Treasurer that we can't see a reduction in our relativities or the actual dollar amount over the forward estimates, because we are trying to get back on our feet in South Australia. The last thing that we need at the moment is a body blow with a reduction in the GST distribution to South Australia. All the conversations have been respectful. They haven't been resolved, but they're going to have to be resolved pretty soon. The federal government's had that Productivity Commission report for a while, and I am actually spending quite a lot of my time at the moment with my federal colleagues, making sure that we get the very, very best deal for our state.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have run out of time. Please join me in thanking the Premier of South Australia, the Honourable Stephen Marshall.
Thank you very much.
Before we close, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite Jeff Connelly, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Siemens, to come forward and propose today's formal vote of thanks. Jeff.
Thanks very much. It's my pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to the Premier. We've had the opportunity today to hear the Premier after his first 103 days. I actually got the nuance on that. He's been in the job 103 days, but the Parliament's only been there 98 days or 99 days. Cabinet. So we wish you luck for the next 100 days. I would like to just recap on a couple of comments that resonated from my point of view, leading on from the discussions we had before the Premier arrived, that there are no silver bullets, and the emphasis actually is on enabling and the framing conditions, and I think that's very sound policy. That you say we're ambitious, but we're realistic in what we think we can achieve in our vision. I love the comment about reassuring the youth in South Australia. You didn't use those words, but I guess I got a bit of licence to bring that youth back, because therein lies the future of the state. If you can attract youth, then everything goes fine for the future. I think it's also very good. Anybody who's run any organisation knows that after a while you don't see things, so any fresh set of eyes looks into the organisation of the state and says, actually, there's a lot of things here that probably were put in for a good reason, but over time don't make sense anymore. So cleaning those up is actually a very sound starting point, I think. A 20-year infrastructure policy, thank goodness, because a 20-year infrastructure policy enables you to not have an incremental view of the next step, but rather to cast your mind much further forward to say, so what does it need to look like in that future? And maybe in infrastructure we move from automated to intelligent to something like integrated intelligent, where those cross-modal opportunities are actually realised if we've got looking far enough forward, and anything we invest in today already has in mind what that 20th year investment might look like. So I think that's a very, very important step. Great to hear your concerns for skills. It also keeps us awake. As we know, we're trying to build in that higher education space, those job-ready outcomes. large part of what we discussed this morning. I'd just like to close in the thank you, and it's fantastic to see you approaching this very, very large audience with such energy. And the way you're working to develop this great state for the future. That's exactly the role of CEDA. It's about economic development for prosperity. Economic, yes, but actually also socially responsible. So I'd like everybody to put their hands together for the Premier and thank him for joining us.